Hello, and welcome to Northern Nightmares, your home for nightmarish stories ranging from a variety of unsettling topics throughout Canada and beyond. I'm your host, Andrew, and today we'll be visiting a park some would say is the Grand Canyon of Canada. I'd also compare it to the likes of the famous Skinwalker Ranch. This is the Nahanni National Park Reserve. Located in the Northwest Territories of Canada, Nahanni is 30,050 square kilometers or 11,600 square miles. It's bigger than most European countries and also bigger than the famous Yellowstone National Park. The landscape is also very diverse, which includes rivers, waterfalls, hot springs, deep canyons, and mountains, just to name a few. Nahanni can only be accessed by plane or boat, as there is no road available, and the closest town is the community of Fort Simpson, where the park's administrative department is located. The park sees up to 1,000 people a year, which is crazy to think when Yellowstone sees more than that on average in just one day. As this region is so untouched by the modern world, it hosts a diverse list of wildlife, flora, and fauna. On record, Nahanni has about 42 mammals, 180 types of birds, 16 species of fish, and even some amphibians. The flora and fauna are just as vast, with over 700 types of plants and 300 types of both moss and fungi. Nahanni is maintained by Parks Canada and the Deschutes First Nations people of the region, that also represent the Dene people, which first settled in the Nahanni, and that's where our story begins. About 10,000 years ago, the Dene people settled in the Nahanni region as archaeological evidence was discovered, this evidence being prehistoric tools found throughout the many sites of the park. The Dene people were highly skilled hunters and fishers who learned in their time the many migration patterns of various animals located in the region, and also were skilled trappers as well, having made their tools using the environment. One could say they were very in tune with nature. However, they weren't the only inhabitants, as the Naha tribe lived in the mountains of the Nahanni, often considered to be fierce people, often starting wars with the Dene, usually raiding their settlements in the lowlands. The name Nahanni comes from the Dene, meaning river of the land of the Naha people, that usually dwelled in the mountains and rivers of the southernmost part of the region. There is no record of how long these two tribes fought, but it is said that eventually the Dene devised a plan to get back at the Naha. One night, a group of the strongest Dene hiked to the main camp of the Naha to raid them in their sleep. However, when they arrived, there wasn't a soul to be found. Their encampments and still lit fires were all that remained. The Naha had just disappeared without a trace, and as of today, there's still no answer to what happened. The story of the Naha is like the famous story of Roanoke, gone like a puff of smoke. The only theory I have found is thought that the Naha traversed to the southern western part of the states and became descendants of the Navajo people, as the Navajo appeared around the same time the Naha has disappeared. But I like to argue as to why the Naha would leave just to end up thousands of miles away when they had such a vast region they could have just called home. We may never get an answer for that, but one has to wonder the truth behind it. Now let's fast forward all the way to the 19th century, particularly during the Klondike Gold Rush era when the Nahanni had many visitors exploring its secrets. The Klondike Gold Rush was a migration into the newly discovered region of Canada as we now know today as the Yukon Territory. It's estimated up to 100,000 prospectors flocked to this region after gold was discovered in Bonanza Creek in 1896. While some became prosperous with their journey, most of these adventurers became penniless. This rush would eventually end in Alaska as gold was discovered and the Yukon felt a major depopulation in 1899. However, a tale of another gold rush would arise, making some to flock to the Nahanni in search of its lost treasure. In 1904, the famous prospecting brothers by the names of Frank and Willie McLeod would be known for traversing the Nahanni, only their trip ended much different than expected. The brothers' journey would start from Edmonton, Alberta, traversing by train, boat, and even by foot until they ended up in Gold Creek, named at the time, which was located in the Nahanni. This expedition would be a success. With gold in hand, they returned to their home at the time of Fort Lillooet. However, this didn't satisfy their hunger, as they would proceed to return in 1905. This expedition would unfortunately be their last, as they would never be heard from again. 3 years later, their other brother, Charlie, would begin a trip through the Nahanni in search of his missing brothers. Upon arriving at one of their frequent camping spots during their first expedition, Charlie had found a burnt tree with some remnant of a previous encamping. Upon further inspecting, some initials were carved into the tree, which he thought was his brother's. Charlie and his crew would continue their trek deeper into the Nahanni along the South Nahanni River edge until eventually finding another encampment with 2 sets of skeletons. Examining the site, Charlie discovered that the skeletons were both missing their heads. One skeleton was reaching out to a gun that was a few feet away. It was determined to be his brother, as Charlie recognized their rings and watches still attached to their hands and arms. Even though it's strange that both brothers were missing their heads, the strangest part is how quickly their bodies had decomposed in only a few years. However, this wouldn't be the only time this similar case would happen. In 1917, a man named Martin Jorgensen would also venture to the same region as the McLeods. He would be found in search of gold as well. He, too, would eventually be found outside his cabin, now burnt down, and his body laying outside missing his head. Another time, during 1920, a bunch of prospectors would be found hanging in trees, flesh gone, and also missing their heads. In 1927, a Yukon fisher would be known to fled into the Nahanni, evading arrest from the RCMP, only later to be discovered by his skeletal remains and headless. This valley was renamed and still named today as the Valley of Headless Men. Anyone venturing into these parts have claimed to hear ghostly cries and apparitions appearing with no heads upon their ghostly bodies. Some claim this could be some of the Nahas still living in secret and attacking the unwanted people in their home, maybe taking their heads as a prize, or is it for some other horrendous desire? This could simply be the work of the many animals that were outside here. However, it still doesn't explain why any animal would make off with people's heads. As strange as that is, headless victims aren't the only thing found here. RCMP would have many reports over the many years of people disappearing, not just in the valley, but in many locations of the Nahanni. Another such case in 1926, a woman named Anne Lefert, a skilled hunter, joined a hunting party, only she would get unfortunately separated from her crew. Her trail was later tracked, but ended up going cold. When the party returned, they discussed their event to the local Dene. The Dene chief would claim they saw someone that matched the description of Anne on top of a mountain range, naked and walking on all fours. Her whereabouts from then would never be discovered. As we get to modern day, some airplanes that have flown over the Nahanni have been known to mysteriously crash or outright disappear. In 1959, a group of 5 prospectors would venture by plane only to end up sharing this fate. I found a couple different leads as to what happened to them. One body was found by the crash site, whereas the other 4 were missing. Later on in the month of March of 1960, another one of those prospectors was found. Alex Mieskonen presumably committed suicide via dynamite, not far from the crash site. Another story in 1962, a man named Angus Black Mackenzie would fly to the Nahanni to make a movie about the region. Unfortunately, would later disappear. With nothing on record as to what happened, RCMP would conduct a search only to find an encampment with a journal signed by Angus. He appeared to have survived for 42 days, but no such trace was found. This area was known to later and still today as Funeral Range, as many airplanes crashes seem to happen the most in this region. In continuing this story on aircraft, there's also been many reports of UFOs and mysterious lights appearing through the Nahanni. The local Dene have shared the tales of strange things moving throughout the sky, moving in the sky in a way that doesn't match conventional aircraft. Of all these events, is the answer simply we're not prepared for the uncharted regions, going in blind, half-cocked because we believe we're unkillable, only to prove wrong by Mother Nature herself? Or is there something else bigger than us lurking in the depths of the valley? Some other stories of the Nahanni include many cryptid sightings, like Bigfoot and what locals would call a bear-dog hybrid, which would be named the Wahila. Often speculated the headless men apparitions could be a cryptid itself, or even the work of many cryptids as a tactic to attract curious prey. It's been said as well, the well-known extinct direwolf is known to prowl this area. The direwolf is a large species of canine, being much larger than the gray wolves of today, at a height of 3.5 feet and 7 feet long. Now, on record, there's no actual proof that the direwolf exists anymore, as it's been extinct for millions of years. But tales throughout the years say animals in the Nahanni are larger than expected. Theories state with no human presence being the top of the food chain, the alpha species here evolved in ways we haven't seen in other parts of the world. With all this going on, one would wonder why we haven't seen any of these things today. Well, one theory suggests it's because they're protected by Parks Canada and the Deschaux people, as there's parts of the park completely forbidden to even enter. The park does allow some access in an area called Zone 1 Special Preservation. Only staff or having a special permit gains access. However, I would think if they're protecting something, this area would have things they want you to see. It could be argued too that all of this is just tall tales, and the real reason behind the protected areas is to preserve the rare wildlife, flora, and fauna from humans, as we are known to be destructive to nature. Whatever the case may be, the Nahanni National Reserve has its fair share of stories and secrets we may never uncover. It's rare nowadays that a place so pure and untouched still exists. With humans growing and cultivating more of the planet, I hope the Nahanni lives on, untouched by us, and able to be experienced by generations to come. And that, my friends, is the story of the mysterious Nahanni National Park Reserve. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful but strange tale, and maybe one day we can go visit it together and bask in its glorious sights, without going missing, and of course, losing our heads. Also, remember, if you have any other stories yourself you would want me to cover in the future, you can email me at northernnightmares@outlook.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get the next episode every Friday, and follow my Instagram as I post constant updates and news. And also, check out my new cover I made for the show. I hope you really like this one. Next week, we're coming back to the Maritimes for a spooky ghost tale. Wear your best clothes as we're attending an evening at a famous stage theater. See you soon, and sweet dreams.